because technically it would not be legal for me to loan it to you. But since I can share it this way. When we were coming up, we got out to where Middle Road hits Route 11, and we turned left. And as you turn left, there was a Burger King. Okay, that would have been the Union position. And then there was a Smoke Hut or whatever. That would have been pretty much where the Confederate position would be. This would have been what it looked like at the end of the day on the 13th. So we're up here. Okay, this is Bowers Hill where we are. But remember we were talking about Gordon coming in from Sandy Ridge? He would have come in this way. Hayes would have come directly this way. And there would have been a lot of fighting right by that Burger King that we drove by on the way here. And that's pretty much how the day ended on the 13th. On the 14th, though, they would have pushed this way. Now, there's an interesting thing that happens late in the day on the 13th. See the 5th Maryland here, and the 1st, some people refer to it as the 2nd Maryland, some the 1st Maryland. And we'll call it the 2nd Maryland because that's what they like to call it at that time period. Camp Hill, by the way, would be, you see the large trees here, there's kind of a gully down there. Camp Hill would be down there. It's now a cemetery. And it may have been then, I'm not sure. But the 5th Maryland Northern would have been there. And the surgeon for the 5th Maryland, his name was Charles Goldsboro. And his opponent that day was the 1st, or we'll call the 2nd Maryland. And he had a brother who was a major, actually, in the 2nd Maryland. And his brother Charles came out because he knew he had a brother fighting on the regiment that they were fighting against. So he came out with a set of binoculars, and he's looking to see if he can't spot his brother, who's actually making repeated attacks on the regiment he's part of. So he's looking out, and he spots looks like an officer on a horse, and he's riding back and forth. And he's really kind of wondering, is that my brother? Now, his brother's name is George. So we have Charles, who's the surgeon for the North, and we have George, who's a major in the 2nd Maryland. And he looks, and apparently a bullet hits the guy on the horse, and down he goes. And he looks and he says, I don't think that was my brother. And it wasn't. Because his brother actually would be part of, on the 15th, part of the process in capturing his brother Charles. And Charles would be captured by some members of the 5th Maryland. Charles would be brought here. His brother George is the provost marshal after they capture Winchester, and he sends his brother off to prison in Richmond. And his brother is in Richmond until December of that year. Now, it's interesting because his brother George, he'll go on to Gettysburg, and at Gettysburg, his colonel is shot, so he becomes, he's second in command, commands the 2nd Maryland, actually at Gettysburg. And his brother is shot through the left lung, taken prisoner, and sent to northern prisons and a place where he can recuperate and just become a regular prisoner. So they send him to Fort Delaware. In December of that same year, his brother Charles is freed in a prisoner exchange, and because he's such a good surgeon, they sent him to Fort Delaware. Which is interesting because when he arrives there, he meets his brother George and his brother Eugene, who had also been a member of the same regiment and was actually wounded in a skirmish in Middletown and sent there as well. So after the war, they always said, for family reunions, they knew the way to do it. And they're all, anyways, it's interesting. The youngest brother, Eugene, who had been wounded in Middletown here, would die from his wounds, and he's buried in New Jersey, of all places. I don't know the reason why. But the other two brothers would survive the war, and the rest of the story I can't tell you because we don't have enough time.
Where's Fort Delaware?
It's
In the middle of
it's an
Delaware.
Middle of the
island,
Delaware River.
right
Pea
off
Patch
of,
Island.
Delaware itself,
Called the Delaware Death Pen.
Yeah, it's in the bay outside Delaware, and they use it as a prison camp for Confederate soldiers. But it's interesting, all three brothers would get together eventually. One would capture the other in effect here and send him off to prison. So if you look at this map, it's easy for you to have it upside down. It's actually, you should be looking at it this way. But we're up here, so on the 14th, when everyone wakes up, they renew the hostilities. Most of the Union troops had retreated farther back up here. Fort Milroy is back in this direction farther. Fort Milroy had a 40-foot flagpole. And I don't know if you may have heard this story, but when Milroy wanted to get intelligence, they would haul him up that 40-foot flagpole so he could get a good view of what was going on around him. And that was, kind of the key. So if you look at this, we're at Bowers Hill. In the morning, Herbert, Gordon, Hayes, and Smith, they all push forward. And to get to this position, you've got some Union troops that are up here, but the Union troops, all of them seeing their first combat, when the Confederates move up here, you're talking 4 brigades moving in this direction. They hightail it once again for the forts more distant in this direction. So there is fighting that takes place here. The fighting itself, though, is, like I said, you've got those 4 brigades, and then what happens is Gordon is to stay here to keep the Confederates busy on the 14th. Herbert stays here, keeping the Union troops busy. And what they decide is that Gordon, Hayes, and Smith's brigades will actually move off to the left over here and try to get around on the Union flank. And they're the ones that are going to make that flank attack on West Fort. And that, of course, is where we're heading next. But just so you realize, all of those brigades, Confederate brigades, got to move here. They're going to, 3 of them are going to retreat. They're actually going to head back down to what the middle road was and circle way out around so that the Union forces here can't tell what they're doing. And when they launch their attack on West Fort, it is a complete surprise to all of the Union forces. But anyway, I brought you here because if you were here on that day and you were to look over to its, that white building over there, that's where you actually would see Early's Dick Ewell's other division heading in that direction into town. And the reason we don't go there is because there's no preserved land over there and there's no real easy place to go. One of my favorite places, if you were to go there, would be that hotel you can see in the distance over there. And the fighting would take place down that way. And like I said, those 2 Maryland regiments would fight at Clear Hill, which is just down over the hill from here. We'll be fighting here, but mostly to occupy Union forces while the Confederates move on their flank attack. Other questions?
Do you know what that building is?
Which one?
The long one to the right of the hotel?
There's Costco and a bunch of other buildings or stores that are in that direction over here. So Costco and whatever else is around Costco would be over there. And that's also where the turnpike is that would have come in, where the other half of Dick Ewell's forces would have come in on that side. If you go to your next map, that shows you a little bit better the movement of troops off to our right here.
Did the Union have any artillery up here?
There were not right here. Union artillery would have been farther back. And you have to realize too, you're talking, most of the guns, most of the artillery was used in this battle by Union forces, was used in sections because they didn't have enough guns. When Jubal Early, for example, goes sweeping around, he'll have 20 artillery pieces with him, plus some additional ones which he didn't think had the range to bombard West Fort. So you're probably talking more like 24 artillery pieces there, and maybe a total of 24 artillery pieces just here. Union Confederates will actually move into this area and mount their own artillery, so that they can fire towards, towards the other fortifications to the north. So this position would be more for Confederate artillery than Union artillery.
The other thing you have to remember is Milroy had a lot of confidence in the fortifications he built and organized back behind us here. So these actions, in his mind, were probably more delaying actions because he was convinced, at least before the battle, he could hold out for months up on the forts that we're going to go see next. That turned out obviously to be true, but I don't think he ever had the mind of holding these heights, as impressive as they are, because he felt he had even better positions and fortifications further back north.
And you wouldn't have to go very far back here to find entrenchments. Of course, they're not there now, but maybe 200 yards from here would have been the first Union fortifications, and that's why when the Union forces are attacked here, they fall back to those positions because they're safer for them. And then all that the Confederates are doing here, with the Demi Brigade and and Gordon's Brigade, the Georgians, is just keeping them busy, so they don't notice that you've got this big flanking movement, that's heading out around this way. Yes.
Is this south?
Yes. Yes.
So that larger map there.
This one?
Yeah.
This would be the end of the 13th, fighting on the 13th.
Can I add a little tidbit real quickly?
Yes.
So if you're wondering why the forts are all north of town, most of those entrenchments were originally constructed during Stonewall Jackson's occupation between the end of 1861 into spring of 1862. Those are heavy heights all the way on the northwestern side of town. They're trying to block off any movements from that direction. When Milroy comes into town, he's going to first arrive just before New Year's Day, 1863. His occupation really starts January 1st, 1863. He's got about half a year here in town that he is reinforcing those fortifications. But he's mostly reinforcing the forts that were already dug and renaming them, rechristening them. For Garibaldi, that was dug by Union forces before that, gets rechristened as Main Fort. Fort Alabama gets rechristened as Star Fort, West Fort, and all of that. And the reason why they're on that side of town is because they were originally constructed by Jackson. But Milroy, he keeps on refortifying them, and his confidence grows in those forts. And like Jim was saying, he gets word of this attack. He's confident that he can hold off in those forts against 3-to-1 odds if he needs to. So his confidence is up with those fortifications north of here.
Definitely. And you're right, and Star Fort is actually one of those forts where he actually tears down a house here and used the stones from the foundation actually to build the positions for the artillery that are there. And as he was saying, when Jackson was here, he was concerned of being attacked from the north, right? Of course, when Milroy is here, I'm not sure he did a great job of protecting himself from the south either, but he did the best they could because Winchester is a horrible place to defend. It really is.
All the 3 battles of Winchester, the defensive side loses.
Yes, and yeah, I'll go with that, okay? But also one thing we didn't mention too is that there had been some concern about Milroy being here anyways. He had said he was here to protect the B&O Railroad. At one point he was ordered to leave here. General Schenck, who was his senior commander, had told him he should leave, and then he said, well, if you feel you can defend the area, then go ahead. So technically I think he should have listened. There's one thing that Abraham Lincoln said once when he lost his election to the Senate, and that was, somebody asked him, well, what would you do differently if you were running for office? And he said, well, I think I'd listen more and talk less. And maybe Milroy should have listened more and maybe abandoned the area. As you'll see, the casualties were pretty much confirmed. Any other questions? Okay. So
We're ready.
when we leave here, it is complicated getting from here to our next stop. So this is what I suggest. You can follow me as closely as you can. Jim, when you leave here, I'm going to go down the hill, make a right, and head out through that way, and go out.
I would encourage everyone to put the next stop in on phones, on GPS,
Yes.
because it's very likely we'll get broken up even more than we have so far.
And we're going to go to a plantation in order The owner doesn't mind if we visit. We can't go in and have breakfast with him. We can visit. When we go down the road, we're going to park on the left-hand side. He insists that everybody parks on the wrong side of the road, and we'll do that. And it's a fairly busy road. We lost 2 battlefield guys from Gettysburg the last time, taken right out.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of guides. So anyways, when we get there, stay on the left-hand side of the road. We'll kind of go up, and we'll tell you the story of what happened there at that particular location. Okay?
So you want us to make a move to go out this way?
That's what I'm going to do. You can also go down back to Route 11